Ah, good old turn-based RPGs. Just like an episode of Dragon Ball Z, all the time in the world to prepare the perfect attack, and the enemies will just sit there and wait for you to do it. Even super bosses, like the Dark Aeons in Final Fantasy X, who may have appeared invincible at first, can be handled pretty easily with just a little bit of preparation. Well, I say a little bit of preparation. It will take some grinding to get to a point where we can think about taking on Dark Yojimbo, but even with less than stellar stats, we can come up with a plan to defeat him. The first obstacle we have to overcome is being ambushed and then being wiped out immediately by a single attack before we even get a chance to do anything. That's easily dealt with. We have Kimahri here with a first strike weapon, so we have him lead the party and he's guaranteed to go first. When the fight begins, we swap him out with Riku, who casts Hyper Mighty G, providing us all with auto life, meaning we can survive any attack thrown at us. During the course of the fight, we can leave a lot of the healing up to the game itself. Any single target attack can be followed up by an auto phoenix and we're right back to where we started. Just make sure before the fight that you do have Stoneproof equipped. And although multi-target attacks may be a little bit scary, we have enough speed to cast auto life between his attacks to prepare. Now that we've thought about how we're going to deal with his damage, we need to think about how we're actually going to hurt him. Unfortunately, with stats and luck as low as they are, regular attacks just aren't going to cut it. Because of the massive damage output it has, and the fact that it bypasses the accuracy checks that normal attacks go through, Wakka's attack reels is definitely the best choice here. So, our attack strategy can be broken down into 3 simple components. 1. Have Wakka use attack reels. 2. Have our other characters use Entrust. And 3. Don't attack otherwise so as not to charge Yojimbo's overdrive. And with that, we now have a nice little blueprint on how to beat Dark Yojimbo, and because this is a boss that can respawn, we now have a way to farm some of the best items in the game. If we look forward now to more modern Final Fantasy games, things have changed quite a lot, and the battles are a lot more action-packed. Although a little guidance can be given to the characters you don't control in Final Fantasy XIII, they will only perform one move from one of the 6 roles depending on your choice of paradigm. Maybe I am being a little harsh on 13's battle system. I'll be honest, I couldn't really get into this game very much, and I'm definitely the kind of person that used the death strategy on Adamant toys. That's okay though, because the next number in the series, ignoring MMOs of course, was a Final Fantasy game that I thought had quite an enjoyable battle system. Final Fantasy XV also puts the focus on your main character Noctis, while the other characters pretty much run around doing what they want according to what the AI tells them, and the only time they really listen to you is when you want to perform a link strike. Trying to control all 4 characters in this game, however, would be a nightmare, and no doubt a lot of the time, 3 out of 4 of them would be dead. Somewhere in the middle of the transition between these games, we would trek to one of my favourite Final Fantasies, 12, or in this case, the Zodiac Age. This game made the bold move to give players a combination of both real-time fighting and the ability to control all of your party at the same time, which may have seemed overwhelming in more heated battles if it weren't for the Gambit system. Not limited to Final Fantasy by any means, every video game in existence has algorithms running behind the scenes, but here the player actually has the chance to create their own set of instructions for Vaan and company. So what exactly is an algorithm, and how does it make all of our video games work? An algorithm is a clear set of instructions that are performed in some order to achieve a particular goal. The key thing to note here is that there should never be any ambiguity as to what the next instruction will be. Let's see how Final Fantasy XII introduces some of the standard rules used in just about every single algorithm out there. Healer classes are my favourite type to play in any RPG, so let's begin by looking at some basic white mage instructions. Whilst wandering around one of the cities like Dalmasca, we can consider ourselves to be pretty safe. However, when we leave the comfort of one of the cities and venture into the wild, we want to ensure that we are appropriately buffed to fend off any threat. So let's take a look at our gambits for Ashe, who's going to make Bosch our tank. We've told her to cast Protect, then Bubble, and then finally Decoy, that last one being the reason that Bosch actually becomes the tank in the first place. As an aside, you can probably see here that Balthier is casting Berserk on himself. He's going to act as our damage dealer, but because of the way Berserk works, we won't really have much input into what he does. Once we step into the wild, you see that Ashe quickly gets to work and begins casting the spells in the order that the gambits are set. As useful as this is for setting up, a linear progression of commands like this isn't going to be of much use in most situations. When fighting various creatures, there's no point in having a set number of attacks for each different kind of encounter. One attack may be enough to take out a wolf, but that won't be the case for stronger enemies, and it would be pretty silly for us to say, attack once, attack again, attack one final time, and just assume that every enemy will be dead. This is where our first algorithmic concept called a while loop comes into play. In an actual algorithm, a while loop might look something like this, and in between these 2 lines are a group of instructions that need to be performed until a target is met. The most basic example here is simply to attack until the enemy's HP is equal to 0. In fact, looking back at the white mage setup from earlier, these commands were actually an example of a while loop. The subtle thing to point out here though is that all 3 commands would not be within the same while loop. For example, if Bosch already had the bubble status on him, but didn't have protect status, it wouldn't make sense to go back through all 3 commands and waste MP on a useless spell. You could add more instructions to this loop to make it act more sensibly, but for now let's just consider it to be 3 separate while loops. To be honest, this is a pretty poor example anyway, because it doesn't make much sense to have a loop that you're only going to perform at most once. Instead here, let's expand out on our instructions a bit for the condition of the while loop. Say we want to make it so that all the characters are buffed whilst out in the field. Well, what we do here is we replace the Bosch condition with Bosch or Ash or Balthier. Hopefully you'll notice the emphasis on the word or there. If we'd used the word and, it would have meant something drastically different. For example, if Balthier is the only one out there with protect on, then the condition Bosch and Ash and Balthier all need protect isn't true, so nothing gets done. I've put these 3 tables on the screen here to show off the differences between your choices in and/or. When creating a while loop, it's really important to think about exactly which times you want the elements of the loop to be carried out. There may be instances where you actually do want to specify the exact number of times to perform a command, and to do something like this, you use what's called a for loop. If we jump back to Final Fantasy X briefly, something like the cheer command can only be used usefully 5 times. Our for loop would look something like this. Outside of the loop, we have a variable that counts the number of times we've cast cheer, and inside, we cast cheer, then increment the number of times we have done the spell, and once that 5 in the condition has been met, we stop. Going back to Final Fantasy XII now, the other important command we want to look at is the if statement. These kind of commands are only carried out once, and only if a condition has been met. For example, the very simple instruction, attack if an enemy is around, can only be performed if an enemy is within sight. If not, you skip over this command. Quite possibly, the most important version of this command is the life or phoenix down command. If no characters have been killed, then there's no need to worry about what the rest of the command says. And even if they have been killed, there's never a need to cast the spell or item more than once. Once brought back to life, you can't be any more alive, so there's no need to repeat the command. And in fact, in the Final Fantasy world, casting life or phoenix down on a target that is not dead can actually have disastrous results. Or you know, in this case, providing you with one of the most broken ways to power level ever. These loops and if statements are the backbone for a lot of algorithms, and from this we can reconstruct the method we talked about at the start of the video for beating Dark Yojimbo. The entire fight is contained in the big while loop that continues on while the enemy's HP is not equal to 0. Well, I say the whole fight. Remember earlier on we said that at the very start of the battle we want Kimahri to switch out for Riku. We only ever need to do this once, so we don't want to include it within the while loop. To begin with, we'll take advantage of that and or combination that we can use in our if statements. Our top priority is keeping our characters alive, so our first if statement will be if Tidus doesn't have auto life, or Wakka doesn't have auto life, or Riku doesn't have auto life, and Riku has her overdrive full, then cast Hyper Mighty G. We'll throw in 3 else if statements here. These are if statements that can only be carried out if the previous if statement's condition wasn't met. These 3 if statements will cover the case where Riku doesn't have Hyper Mighty G available, but we still need to cast auto life on a particular character. Bear in mind here as well that I didn't put Riku's name first here randomly. As our main source of healing, Riku is the one we need to focus on keeping alive the most. Once again, we don't need to worry about Auto Phoenix because the game takes care of that for us. Now that our team's suitably protected, let's focus on how we're going to actually take down Yojimbo. We want to be using Wakka's attack reel as much as possible, so that'll be our first command if it's available. In terms of attacking for Tidus and Riku, their only job is to buff up Wakka's overdrive bar. Each of them therefore will have an if statement that says if their overdrive bar isn't empty, cast and trust on Wakka. Now at this point with most of the bosses, you'd think since we'd carried out all the specific commands, since we have nothing left to do, we might as well just attack. For this particular fight however, that turns out to be quite a bad call, because as we saw before, most of our attacks will most likely miss, and all we're doing is getting his overdrive bar closer to the 1-hit kill. So our final command for this loop will just be to have the characters pass their turn until a better opportunity presents itself. So there it is, Final Fantasy XII giving a little bit of basic insight into how algorithms work behind the scenes in games. What other common commands did I not cover and have helped you out in various situations? Please talk about them in the comments, and thank you for watching.